Hey, everybody. Jesse Slaughter with the Pursuit Podcast. And today's guest is Derek VanLuchene. It's hard to speak for Derek. You're going to have to watch this episode for yourself as we dive deep into the abduction and eventual murder of his little brother, Ryan. This is a very, very sensitive subject matter, but one that is very important to be talked about. Our children are our most precious resource, and we have to do everything that we can in our community to protect them. We have to stand up as law enforcement. We have to stand up as a community, and our judiciary system has to stand up for children as well. As you'll see, you'll learn about the successes and failures of our justice system as Derek tells his story and educates us about this. Stand by.
69 foot pursuit. Stop! Sir, stop!
Welcome, Derek.
Hey, welcome, Sheriff.
I am so
Thanks for having me.
so excited to have you. So I saw you and I was like, I got to get him on, and you accepted right away, and I was so humbled by that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been watching what you're doing, and it's just great stuff.
Thanks.
I mean, the guests you've had on and just the platform itself is just going to get a lot of good words out there.
You know, it's funny, this platform kind of grew out of kind of the post-COVID world.
Right.
And all the political division and all the ugliness.
Yeah.
And the R's and D's, and you know, nobody wants to talk to each other anymore because my tribe believes this, and kind of my wife actually had a heart to heart with me about it, because you know, when you're in politics, you start slipping down those ropes really quick.
Right.
You know, and she was like, you need to stop this, and you need to focus on what's really important. And this was kind of the brainchild that came out of it, is like, okay, yeah, we got to, but we have to be purposeful about it. We have to bring people from all different walks of life, all different places, but that are somehow germane to our community.
Right.
You know, there's some type of connection. It's not just a, you know, hey, you're a cool skateboarder and we want to bring you on. We didn't want to do that.
Right.
And so that was kind of the purpose. So our Sheriff's Legacy Foundation, we pitched the idea to them because we have a nonprofit foundation that raises money, and part of their charter is education, public education. And so when I pitched the idea, they loved it. So they funded all this.
Oh, that's great.
And all the advertising, because we'll have breaks and we have advertisers, all that money goes back to the foundation. And right now, like, we're on a big school safety push.
Right.
So we're buying equipment to harden our schools, protect our schools, make sure our deputies have everything they need, explosive breaching equipment if that's what they need to get inside a school and protect kids. So it's been a really fun project, and I appreciate your kind words, because and I'm glad that you recognize it, because that's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think with COVID and just the way things are right now, I think people have lost sight of the human aspect of a lot of things. And so I think if you can work to bring that back and to bring people that are interested or out there doing good things, I think that's what people need to hear.
One of the things that's cool about it is, you know, we've got liberal people, conservative people, doesn't matter. When we actually sit down and talk about issues, there's like almost no difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we tribal up and stand on one side of the street and another group stands on the other, and we yell at each other. And it's like, that's when you actually have a conversation, that's not what really happens.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I think sometimes it takes tragedies and, you know, world events to bring us together to realize, you know, we all want the same thing. You know, we're all working towards the same thing. And that's just to live every day to our fullest and be happy, you know?
Absolutely. Hey, so you have an amazing story. And so I kind of want to start a little bit, and I kind of want to set the tone for this, and I kind of want to start with your childhood, and just kind of I want to bring everybody to where you are today. Yeah. What's wrong with that?
Well, when I was 5, no, we won't start back that. I grew up in Conrad, Montana, up north here, north of Great Falls a little bit. Great little community, about 2,500 people, and just lived a normal, you know, growing up there in a small town, you know, went to schools there, just a great upbringing. And, you know, with the mullet and everything and the fast car and all that, but, the typical 80s stuff growing up. But, in the spring of 1987, I was 17 years old, and my parents had split up. They decided to divorce, and kind of a hard time for kids, and we're used to kind of having a together home, but they split up, and my dad worked in Conrad. He worked at the hospital there. My mom also did, but my mom had taken a job in Libby, Montana, and it decided to leave Conrad. And I was kind of in the middle situation with high school. I was 17, still in high school. I made the decision to stay with my dad in Conrad, and my mom moved with my little sister and brother to the community of Libby, kind of this, the same size town, and she moved there and took a job with their hospital there, where she was overseeing the X-ray department there. And so my little brother Ryan was 8 years old, and my little sister Katie at the time was 13 when they moved there. And that was in June of 1987. And so they moved to that small town, and, we kind of got used to, well, not really used to, but we were, apart as a family, and that was some adjustment. And, staying back with my dad, I was trying to finish high school and continue on, and would go see my mom quite a bit during that time. So, and they kind of started their life there in Libby, and my mom went to work one day, August 31st, 1987. She went to the hospital to go to work. My little sister and brother, they stayed home. It was the last day before school started that summer, and they stayed home. Mom went to work, just a normal day, like Mom did almost every day. Gave them a list of chores to do. Hey, while I'm gone, do this. And my little brother went outside to play about 10:30 in the morning on that day, and disappeared. He was there 1 minute and gone the next. And my little sister, who was home with him, started to look for him, and started to, behind Mom's house, there was a creek that ran behind there, and he liked to go down there and catch minnows and play. And so my little sister obviously went to look for him, and he was nowhere to be found. So she called Mom at work, and Mom came home, and they started looking together, and there was just no sign of him. And so Mom called law enforcement, and law enforcement's response at first was assumptions. He's an 8-year-old kid. It's the last day before he has to start school. Mm-hmm. He loves being outdoors, but Mom and those kids were pretty new to that community, so they didn't know a whole lot. So Mom started to get concerned with, where he could have gone, right? So, law enforcement kind of made some assumptions, I think, at first. But then when they did respond, they took the report. And I was still back in Conrad. And that night, I remember I was a box boy at Buttery Foods, if everybody remembers Buttery's back then.
I do, yeah.
But I was a box boy there, and I was stocking groceries in the frozen aisle. So I had these big gloves on, and I was stocking. I'll never forget, it was Swanson TV dinners, turkey TV dinners. And I was putting them in the freezer one by one, and I looked over towards the front door of the store, and my dad walked in. And I thought, oh, shit. I'm either, maybe he found the beer in my room that I had stashed.
Right.
I didn't know. I was like, for my dad to walk into work, that was like, what the hell's going on? And so he came up to me and he said, your brother's missing, and we need to go to Libby. Well, Conrad and Libby are 240 miles away, and that was before cell phones and, but we hopped into his car and started to drive, and I remember asking questions like, what do you mean he's missing?
Right.
He's 8 years old. Where could he be? And my thought was, he wandered off, got lost. A lot of things go through your mind.
Absolutely.
About, what could have happened. And And I had my mind set that by the time we got to my mom's house, all this driving is going to be for nothing.
Right.
We'll turn around, come back, because he will have been found. And we arrived in Libby about, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and walked into Mom's house. And I'll never forget my mom sitting there, and she was just sitting on the couch. We walked in, and I'm like, "Where is he?" And she goes, "They haven't found him yet." And I knew at that point that something was terribly wrong. I knew that he was missing.
Right.
He's afraid of the dark. He's an 8-year-old kid. He's not going to leave home. He doesn't know that many people. And just that palpable feeling that I got, even at a young age, even at 17 years old, I can just remember it. And so, law enforcement was involved. And it took them quite a bit of time to actually send an officer to our house after Ryan was reported missing, because I don't think that they wanted to believe that he was really missing. They
Right.
said, just hang out. He'll come back. He'll come back. He's just out doing some stuff, as a little kid would. And I think that they hesitated. They're small department. They don't handle things like that. And but when they did respond, they got some resources out there, started looking. So search and rescue was out. A lot of the community came out to look for him, but that lasted into the next day. And I remember, walking up and down that creek behind Mom's house, calling his name, looking, thinking he's got to be here somewhere.
Right.
A little kid just doesn't fall off the face of the earth like that.
Right.
So we looked, and that next day turned into that next evening. And that night, I was standing out in our front yard, and I was drinking a Coke Classic at the time. And I was standing there. A lot of my family had showed up, my mom's brothers and stuff, and to help look or, search. And standing there, and all of a sudden I saw a patrol car come around the corner. And then followed by a bunch of other cars. And I was like, oh, this isn't good. They know something. So the sheriff, Ray Nixon, at the time, he got out of his car, and my mom, he walked up to my mom, and he said, we found Ryan. We found his body. And the next thing he said is, we have somebody in custody for his murder. Just thinking, putting that together, an 8-year-old kid and murder.
Yeah.
Just doesn't go together.
No.
And so, what happened after that is pretty fuzzy, but the unimaginable thinking, we didn't know. Did somebody actually accidentally hit him and leave, and then try and hide him? Or we didn't know, but in the next hours, days, weeks, months, years, we got to know the guy that took him, a guy by the name of Robert Hornback, who kidnapped him out of the backyard playing on the creek, sexually assaulted and murdered him. Ryan was found about a half mile from our backyard in Libby. So just learning about that and learning his past crimes against children. So he had been convicted in 1984, 3 years before Ryan's disappearance. He'd been convicted for sexually molesting a 13-year-old boy. So essentially, he molested this boy at knife point, threatened the boy with a knife, molested the boy, let the boy go. The boy subsequently identified him, and he was charged, sent to prison for 3 years. He was actually sentenced to 5 years. He spent 3 of those 5 years and got out for good behavior.
A whole 5 years.
Yeah. So he was released into the community. His mother lived in the community. He was released into the community, and 90 days later is when he took Ryan. So he immediately got out and started looking for his next victim. And we know that by documentation that he wrote everything down. And we know that he immediately started to look for his next victim. And he watched Ryan for about 2 weeks before Ryan was taken. Detailed notes about watching the family. I was there the weekend before Ryan was taken, and he writes about seeing me there. And there's an older kid. I don't know quite what to do. Might have to kill the whole family kind of thing. So he was very intent on what he was going to do. And, happened to find my brother playing in the backyard, watching him and watching the patterns and what he liked. He was able to grab Ryan.
Jeez. It angers me deeply, and it angers me for a multitude of reasons. It angers me because you're right. For decades, law enforcement was complacent when it came to we don't even at the sheriff's office anymore. We don't call kids who run away from home. We don't call them runaways.
Right.
We call them missing persons.
Absolutely.
And they're a full-on missing person case.
Yep. And
we track them, and we make sure our people solve them. And you don't just let that case linger.
Right.
And that mentality of that complacency is just, it disgusts me. And it's funny. It was alive and well in the early 2000s when I was first started in law enforcement. Yeah. It wasn't until probably after a lot of the work that you've done and others have really worked hard, it probably wasn't until, I'm going to say, a decade ago where that pendulum was starting to change.
Right.
But it's not there yet.
No.
It's not even close. But that just infuriates me when I hear it. And the other thing that infuriates me, and it just happened here, these judges and their light sentences on these guys, they're not treatable.
Right. Right.
It's proven time and time again. The sexual urge is the most powerful thing that there is, and it's not treatable.
Yeah.
And they do not belong in our society at all.
Yeah. If you took somebody like Robert Hornback and let him out of our prison right now, he's still in prison. I'll talk about, his sentencing and stuff like that. But if you took somebody like him and put him on a street corner in Great Falls, Montana, you would have a missing and probably dead child within a very short time. Mm-hmm. Because, and I've got lots of, he sent me a letter from prison in 2006. It came to my work. I was with Montana DCI at the time as an agent. I was working. It came in a pile of mail. He stamped it legal mail and got it out of the prison, sent it to the Attorney General's office. We were, of course, in a substation there, so they saw it was stamped in legal mail, and they're like, oh, VanLuchene's in legal trouble again, and they forwarded it on to the office. It was a letter from him saying, I didn't do it. I'm innocent. Maybe you and I can be friends and come together and heal over this. I'm not responsible for his death, but I could have prevented it, is what he said in the letter. He talked in that letter about how he kept a school picture of Ryan in his cell in prison. And he'd look at it every day to pray to God that, for forgiveness. And so all those years later being impacted by that, this happened in 87 and we're still impacted by it.
Absolutely.
It just, somebody like that, you can't just say, give them treatment or put them in any environment where they will not victimize somebody. And if it's not kids, it'll be somebody else.
Absolutely.
And, with Hornback, he was, pled guilty to deliberate homicide for my brother. And he pled guilty. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive 100-year terms in our state prison. And we've been through 9 different appeals since then with him. Appealing his sentence in some form or fashion.
Right.
So in November of 2019, he actually won an appeal through our Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ordered him to be resentenced at the district court level. So they essentially said, hey, district court, his sentence was illegal when he was sentenced back in 1988. You need to resentence him.
What was illegal about it? What did they cite?
So he got 100 years for the deliberate homicide, and he got 100 years for something they call a persistent offender.
Yeah, persistent felony offender.
Yeah, persistent felony offender. Well, since he had spent his time on the last act against the 13-year-old boy, they found through several years of negotiation that persistent felony offender 100 years didn't count. He shouldn't have been sentenced to that. So they kicked it back to the district court. So November 2019, we had to go as a family back to Libby and give our victim impact statement. Well, we're sitting 10 feet from the guy. They brought him in chains and stuff. And my mom and I got up there and, gave a victim impact statement about, what this has done to our family over the years. And he got up and told the judge, he said, I didn't do it. He's conclusively tied to the crime scene.
Yeah.
He's conclusively tied to the crime scene with DNA, and which they've tested over and over. But, he said he didn't do it. The judge sentenced him to 100 years and gave him possibility of parole.
Gave him possibility of parole.
Yeah.
Really?
So December, almost a year ago, we went to a parole hearing before the Montana Department of Corrections, where we had to again go and give our victim impact statement. And it was an interesting kind of hearing because he got to go first. So he got to appear before the parole board and tell them, how he's better, how they should let him out. And he took that time to say that, he didn't do it. And he tried to turn it into a new trial. And the credit of the parole board, their chairman just said, hey, this isn't a hearing. We're not retrying this. This is about you getting out into society. And once he heard that, he said, I don't think I can. He says, I would be afraid to be around kids.
Well, at least he said something honest.
Yeah. And then when it was our turn to speak, he didn't want to hear us. He didn't want to hear he tried to address me directly, and say, hey, maybe you can just come to the prison. We can sit down and talk about this. And it's like, hell no, dude. And once he found out that we were going to say something, he said, I'm not ready for this. I don't want this hearing. I don't want paroled. And it ended. And with him just tapping out going, hey, I don't want this. And so that was unique. Talking to the parole board, they hadn't seen something like that before. But we were able to give them our side of, the impact. And he was denied parole, so it'll be another 6 years before we've got to deal with that.
I think that judge is disgusting. There's no reason for parole on that case. There's no reason. And there's no legal reason for it.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court did what they did and whatever. The Supreme Court always frustrates me in Montana anyway, but there's probably some legal precedent on that. But I know there's not a legal precedent on the other thing. And it's this virtue signaling bullshit that these people can be rehabilitated or that these people can go back into society, and they can't.
Yeah.
They cannot do it.
Yeah.
The only thing they need is incarceration or death. That's the only thing that's going to fix their problem.
And I always say to Jesse is if you're somebody that hurts a child in that way, you don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to quit that. I'm just going to exit that out of my life. And somebody and Hornback is a rare type of offender. He's a very rare, the most dangerous type of offender there is.
Yeah.
And somebody like that, there's no rehabilitation.
No.
There's no ability to say he'll be good in society.
And the problem that the courts always seem to forget is that they also have a duty. There's a couple duties, but one of the ones is punishment.
Right.
It always gets overlooked. But there's also this element that person needs to be punished commensurate with that crime.
Right.
and it's just so aggravating that they don't take that seriously.
Yeah.
And then your family gets to relive this every 6 years now.
Yeah. And we've come leaps and bounds since, this happened to our family, and especially in terms of how we treat crime victims and what they go through. When Ryan was killed, we did not have any type of victim advocate or somebody that could tell us what we were going to face through the justice system. Somebody that could say, okay, this is going to be a hearing. This is going to be this. We had nobody. So we were blindly led through this thing, not knowing what to expect. And that's changed a little bit. We do have victim advocates now. When Hornback took his plea, basically the prosecutor called us up and said, hey, he's willing to do a plea deal, to save your family from going through a trial. I think we should take it. Why don't you guys give it an hour or so and then let me know what you think? So we were given very little time to think about it. And the condition that we were in at the time as a family.
How long after Ryan's death did it get to plea? I mean, how long did that take?
I think it was almost a year. Almost a year's
Which
time.
is relatively quick.
Yeah.
That's actually relatively fast.
And, that plea, it was just about a year, I think, before that plea agreement came in. But he took the plea. We accepted the plea as a family. And I remember the prosecutor saying, you'll never have to, he can go to prison. You guys will never have to deal with this again. You can, I love when people say, oh, you can get closure. There's never any closure on this type of stuff, and we found out, this guy just continues to appeal. He continues to go down that road of trying to get out of prison.
Well, one of the things that people need to understand about sexual predators and child predators, and part of what I think he did to your family during the parole hearing is they find ways to re-victimize the family because they get they get pleasure out of it.
Yeah.
One of the real common things that a child predator or sex offender will do is they'll abuse a child, and if they've kept a child alive, they'll kill themselves in jail.
Right.
So that that child never gets a day in court, never gets to have that. And they do these sick things to keep victimizing essentially their victim over and over again.
Yeah.
And you now guys have taken Ryan's place as the victim.
Right.
And he's going to try to do it at every turn.
Yeah.
And it's disgusting.
When he wrote me that letter in 2006, he addressed it to me as a DCI agent.
Yeah.
He named all my family members all my family members, my mom and dad, one of my dad's brothers. He knew everybody almost in the family, which he used to say, listen, I know everything about you.
Yep.
I'm in control. I know about you. Yep. And I know that you're a cop. I know that, your family, this, even down to the point that about a year after Ryan's death, I got really sick and ended up in the hospital for quite a long time. And he even knew about that.
Jeez.
And then he also said something else in that letter about, hey, how about you and I be friends so you can tell people about it, that you've forgiven me, and maybe, just maybe, we can, I can get out of here. That's what he's looking for.
Yeah, he's manipulating it.
He wants to be free, so he can do what? So he can do it again.
Do it again.
Yeah.
And that was proven by what he said.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
So, wow, that is so much. I don't. It's every person's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
100 times over and over again. So talk to me about the aftermath. Obviously, you've discussed the aftermath with involving him, but talk to me about the aftermath and what happened in your life after that.
Well, I at 17 when this happened, I can remember having to grow up really quickly.
Yeah.
The cool shit that I was doing, the little partying and the mullet and the girls and the cars, that all went away because really we had to grow up and we were faced with this situation that something had happened that very rarely happens to people. And we were at the center of it, you know. So we kind of went, you just go numb, you know, when things happen around you. I remember I went back to high school after this happened, you know, and couldn't make it through half a day of school, you know, because your mind's running about things, you know, and what if this, and, you know, I looked at my little sister. She was really afraid that this guy was going to get away. He was going to escape and finish what he started, you know, and just that huge impact on the family that it had. My dad, I think, you know, my dad died in 2007, but he was never the same after that. You know, my mom, she's a strong, strong lady. I mean, the things that she's endured, the people she's helped, it's just amazing, you know. But my little sister, you know, struggles. My older sister struggles, and I struggle. I got done with high school, went to college, and then got into law enforcement. And I like, that's the way I'm going to help people. You know, that's the way I'm going to help people. Yeah. But I forgot to help myself. Yeah. You know, I ignored that. I forgot to help myself, and I thought, I'm going to dump my everything into helping other people, and that'll help heal me. And it did. I mean, don't get me wrong, it helped me a lot. But the after effects, and I see on TV they use that word closure, you know, and you just never get that. You never really get it. And I don't care if you're a parent or a sibling or an aunt or an uncle. It's something that you never forget. There's no when you lose a family member in that way. Yeah. I mean, I think people can get closure when, you know, their grandparents, moms, dads die of natural causes. Right. You know, they died from too many birthdays, as we refer to it in law enforcement. You know, right. You know, one too many. Right. They just they did. You know, even things like, even plausible things like a car accident or a plane crash or something. People can, yes, there's probably some level of closure, but the problem is like I've never seen anybody, if I've investigated a child homicide, or even child sexual abuse in which the child lives from it, I've never seen people get closure from that. Right. There's always a hole in them from that. Yeah. And it's just, I think I'm really glad that you're talking about that, because I think that's really important. People think that, and it's bad advice to give somebody who's going through it. Like, absolutely. Oh, well, you'll get closure soon. You know, it's not happening. You know, I remember, you know, and this impacted not only just our family, but a community, you know, the community of Libby, really the state of Montana. There's a lot of people. I was with DCI, and I was working an investigation over in Libby, and I went to the clerk of district court to file some paperwork on this case that I was working. And so this gal comes up to help me, and we're going through paperwork, and I'm looking at it, making sure she has the right copies and everything's conformed and everything like that. And I look up and she's crying. I'm like, oh God, what did I say? Because, you know, sometimes I say shit and offend people. You know, that's bad. But she was crying, and I said, I'm sorry. I said, are you all right? I'm like, are you okay? And she just looked at me and she goes, I remember what happened to your brother. And she says, I just think about you guys every day. And it impacted her so much. Oh yeah. So many years later, you know, and so I call it a spider web effect. Absolutely. It just absolutely affects everybody, you know. And so, you know, getting into law enforcement for me was a way that I could maybe give back. Yeah. You know, maybe give back a little bit. And had a great law enforcement career, you know, did some great stuff and got to do, you know, see some things. But I remember thinking there was something more, you know.
You started in Conrad, right?
Yeah, Conrad PD.
Conrad PD. Yeah. And then how many years were you there?
I was there 7.5 years.
Okay.
And then I went to the Montana DCI, and I was there just a little over 10.
Yeah.
With there. So, and just great. I mean, I still, what's bad about, you know, not being in it, no, you know, nobody, you know, in law enforcement's in there anymore. Everybody's gone, you know? Yeah. You know, there's a few of us left, but, mostly like DCI, my old agency. I don't know anybody there anymore.
What year did you start in law enforcement?
1991.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was a while ago, and I see how far law enforcement's come. And I have the opportunity, luckily, now to work around the country with law enforcement. And when it comes to this issue, it's really nice to see not only the interest, but the response. The response that I was just in Fort Lauderdale, Florida this week. I got there on Sunday, was there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, came back Thursday. But, I had about 75 law enforcement in the group that was there. And my job is to make sure they know what to do when a child goes missing, And you get a lot of this. Everybody takes up the back row, like we know in law enforcement.
Yep.
And everybody's like this, just looking and just staring at me, And I'm up there in a suit and tie, and I'm introducing myself. And I always ask them, who's voluntold to be here today? Just be honest with me. Who was voluntold? Who was told that they had to be here by their supervisor? And inevitably, I'll get about half of the people that raise their hands. Say, yeah, shit. I was told to go to this training. Here I am. And I always tell them, by the time this 3 days is over, you'll be goddamn glad that you came. And I tell my brother's story.
Yeah.
The what ifs. Less than 1% of all kids that go missing, which there's 800,000 kids in this country that go missing every year.
Right.
Less than 1% of those kids are abducted and murdered by a stranger.
Absolutely.
So Ryan's in that less than 1%. So I always tell people, it's like when you go to the range, why do you go in law enforcement? Why do you go out to the pistol range? Because you're preparing for that worst case scenario.
Yep. That which is another less than 1%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we worked officer involved shootings, we looked at the record, the officer's record on the range. What courses were they shooting? How proficient were they? So we could use that to say, hey, they were prepared to react in the worst case scenario.
Yep.
And by their training, they reacted correctly. And same thing, I always tell law enforcement, same thing with missing children. You prepare for that worst case scenario.
Absolutely.
And you get the what ifs. Well, what if we call everybody out? We get the helicopters from Elstrom Air Force Base. We get all this search and rescue out there, and the child's found. And I always say, what was your last sentence?
Yeah.
The child is found. That's our goal.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And it's about front loading those resources.
You know what terrifies me about what you just said? It just terrifies me. Is it goes back to bosses that don't have the courage to spend money because they're afraid there's going to be a consequence for spending money.
Right. Right.
And there isn't a constituent in this country that cares how much money we spend to find a kid.
Right.
They don't care.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. If you're worried, get on TV and say, send us some money. And overnight you'll have about $3 million and you won't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That,
and I think I always hear in the leadership or administrative courses that we do, I always hear people say, well, I'm afraid to pull the trigger. What if I do this, or I issue an Amber Alert, or I call out a child abduction response team, what if I'm wrong? And I said, you can never be wrong when it comes to a missing child.
It's still a success. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I've been fortunate. I've been involved in Amber Alert investigations. I've been the lead investigator on it. And then as sheriff, I've had to manage one.
Yeah.
And we've been successful every time. And it's not, here's the part that frustrates me about it. And for everyone listening out there, it's not a hard investigation to do.
No.
But what it does require is a lot of money and a lot of resources. And I'm not saying you throw it at it. You have to be trained, like the training you're doing.
Right.
It's not throw money and resources. I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
But if you understand the training and you're strategic, and I'm the type of person, if we get a missing child, we get an Amber Alert, we get whatever, I'm like, okay, well, how much resources do we got? Okay, double it.
Yeah.
triple it. Let's
Boots
go.
on the ground.
Let's
Yeah.
go.
Yep.
You know, and whatever we think we covered once, go cover it again. I can't tell you how many times we have found children in a place they said was checked.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, and so it's just what it is. It's just having the courage to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
And that's just it, getting people past that. And in our training that we do with law enforcement, and my training's all through the National Criminal Justice Training Center, which is funded by the Department of Justice. And we have a whole host of different trainings that we provide. My area is the child abduction response. But we try and give a number of scenarios or actual cases. We do case studies with people, with law enforcement to say, okay, put yourself in this situation. How would your department respond to that? And being, giving those scenarios and having them be willing to work through it. And you get a lot of, even in the bigger jurisdictions, hell, Fort Lauderdale's not a small place.
No.
And they're like, I ran them through a scenario that happened in a rural town. And they said, well, I don't know if we would have responded like that.
Yeah.
And it was a successful recovery of the child, but to take a rural area, put it in Fort Lauderdale, and even they don't have the resources to respond.
Yeah.
It says a lot. So putting people in different scenarios, scenario-based stuff, we know that works.
Well, it's just like when we train on the range, to use your example,
Yeah.
right? You try to make it as close to what would happen in real life so that their brain's been there before, so they're not so uncomfortable. But I mean, this is a bold statement, but I believe in it in my total heart. If you don't have the courage to do what's right for these kids, you don't belong wearing the badge.
Absolutely.
You absolutely do not belong in this position. If you don't have the courage to do what you need to do when it comes to kids. And I say that because they're so vulnerable.
Right.
And they can't speak for themselves and they can't defend themselves. Yep. And when I used to work internet crimes against children, I used to tell my boss, it's put on your cape time.
Yeah.
Like it's the time where you actually get to make an impact and do something.
Yeah.
And
it's back to your point earlier too, when you mentioned like runaways, and the way we look at runaways, 78% of the kids that run away will fall victim to some kind of crime.
yes, they will.
That's a high percentage.
That's a way high percentage.
So you're looking at the actual victimization of a child, that's run away. Yeah, I always hear from law enforcement, well, they chose to be gone. Well, there may be some circumstances that they're running from, not to.
Well, one of the things that we do is we question them about the reasons that they ran away.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you'll find out they're being maybe abused at home.
Right.
But the problem is they're being abused at home and they run away. Now, and I do want to say for everyone watching, not all kids that run away or are missing kids were abused at home, but that's a common circumstance.
It is.
And so they're being abused at home. But here's a problem, and you know this better than anybody. There's two elements here. If you're running away from something that bad, who will you go to? Will you go just about anybody that you believe won't abuse you?
Right.
But the predators know what an abused kid looks like.
Absolutely.
And they make them a mark, and they treat them well, and they take care of them until they get their opportunity to abuse them.
Vulnerabilities.
Yep.
Yeah. And I can remember in my early law enforcement days, we had one kid that probably about 15 years old, and he kept running away. And we would get the call, we'd go find him, and we'd put him right back in the home.
Yeah.
And then he'd run away again. We'd go find him, we'd put him back in the home. And years later, I think I arrested him DUI years later, and he was in a car crash, and I was the officer on the DUI, and I asked him, I said, hey, when you were a kid, what the heck? We were always looking for you. You were always ducking and hiding, and he said, my stepfather was abusing me.
Yep.
And I went, oh.
Yeah.
And we kept putting him back in that same situation.
Yeah. And I've had the same thing happen to me too.
Yeah.
And part of it was though, when you and I first grew up in law enforcement, nobody was talking about this. Nobody was teaching it. Nobody was paying attention to, maybe there's a reason.
Yeah.
They were just like fix that problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Fix that problem.
Yep.
That was the mentality.
Yeah. And unfortunately, you know, in law enforcement, we just have so little time and resources to deal with things that we're like, oh, somebody else will take care of that, or oh, somebody else, you know, and like on missing children, sometimes, you know, I'll get people say, well, we'll just call the FBI. Which is great. Call the FBI. Yeah. I want them. They're a great resource, but they're going to take a while to respond. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to get that many agents.
Well, and you got to supplement everything. They might bring some cool tools to the table.
Yeah.
And they might bring some intel resources and some different things we don't have access to.
Sure.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You know, but at the same time, I mean, I know in our organization, we're trying to make sure that we have everything that the federal agencies have.
Right.
And the reason why is I don't want to hit the ground and get running on an event like that and then be waiting on them for some tool. Because oftentimes, and the FBI actually does a fantastic job with missing persons once they get there. Mm-hmm. The problem is they will do things like they will be like, well, don't start spinning that up yet till we get there because we need to put this before this. Yeah. And you're like, no, we're spinning everything up.
Yeah.
And we can fix it all later when you get here, but we're not going to slow down.
Yeah.
You know.
And that's, you know, in starting these child abduction response teams, there's about 137 active teams across the nation right now and steadily increasing that. But, you know, I'll get a lot of, you know, well, we know the FBI is here. Right? That's a great thing, you know, great resource, but this is a localized effort.
Yep.
You know, it's having a team of people that are local that can respond with those resources front loaded.
Yep.
One of the officers that investigated Ryan's case, my little brother's case, said to me years later when we were in an appeals hearing for Hornback, he said, I always felt bad because he said, I think I spent more time looking for my resources than I did your brother.
Yeah.
And that had and I was in law enforcement at the time, and his statement to me just had a huge impact on me.
Oh, yeah.
That he was out there looking for resources when he could have been looking for Ryan. And that's something I tell law enforcement, you know, do you want to look for the kid or you want to look for your resources? You know, so the premise of that a child abduction response team is to get those resources front loaded. So when you get that call, you know where your resources are and you have all these assignments already delved out. So if I respond, you got a missing child, I'm part of the CART team, I respond, and I'm in charge of leads. I know that I go and manage leads. You know, any tips that come in, that's my job, and get them disseminated. So it's a really good, and it works well. We've seen a lot of success stories around the country on it.
Absolutely. No, we're part of a team here, a CART team.
And, city, county.
And we're absolutely ecstatic, and it's long overdue. And it's just amazing stuff. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Your health journey is as unique as you are. The Peak Great Falls has everything you need for your fitness journey. They are your partner in wellness with a top-notch facility and expert staff and a very welcoming vibe. Locally owned, community-driven. Join them today. Everybody needs a good insurance plan. Whether it's for home or auto insurance, check out Heinbaugh Agency. Eric Heinbaugh is a local agent focused only on customer service, not sales. The Double Barrel Cafe is all about you, the amazing people of Cascade County. With every purchase you make, they give back to our community. Every bite and sip fuels their mission. Let's make a positive change, one cup and one bite at a time, because the Double Barrel is not just a cafe, they're building a better community. If you haven't noticed lately, Cascade County is booming, and the choice for all your construction needs is Builders First Source. They even have an automated home builders solution for all of your construction needs. Go to 826 Northwest Bypass in Great Falls and check them out today. Are you looking to replace those floors in your home? Or maybe you're doing new construction? The place I trust is Contract Flooring Carpet One. This is a locally owned and operated business here in Great Falls, and they are committed to serving you and giving you the very best prices and the very best product and service. Go see Contract Flooring Carpet One today. If you love a farm-to-table experience as much as I do, then you have to go to the Roadhouse Diner. The local McCafferty Ranch beef served on every burger. Try my personal favorite, Death by Bacon, today. When deciding who I would trust for the technology component of this podcast, the choice was simple: Information Systems of Montana. Whether purchasing products for business or when I had them build me a new MacBook to catch child predators, they delivered, creating a solution for my exact needs. Contact Information Systems of Montana today. If you're passionate about firearms and the Second Amendment like I am, one of the best places in all of Montana to go is Mitchell Supply. Jim and Tammy Mitchell have been running this gun store for decades. They're major supporters of the Second Amendment, and they're major supporters of our community. And obviously, they're supporters of this podcast. For all your firearms needs, go check out Mitchell Supply today. Let's go back a little bit here. So you go through your DCI career, and I wanted to talk about your law enforcement career a little bit, but you said, there was something else I felt like I should be doing.
Yeah.
And so talk to me about the transition.
Well, it was just a point in my career where, I don't know, it just was this calling from someplace. And I don't know exactly. I did believe it was my brother talking directly to me. I was doing well. I was in a career high, but I got when I first started thinking about it, I got a training announcement that my boss said, "Hey, why don't you check this out?" And it was a missing child training in San Diego. And he says, "Why don't you go to it and see what it's about?" It's about putting together these teams or whatever, and that was in the infancy when the Department of Justice came up with the CART concept. And I said, "Yeah, I'll go."
Yeah.
So I went to San Diego, and I flew there, and I was afraid of flying then. I was just deathly afraid of planes, but I got there, and I ended up going down to the bar in the hotel and sitting there and having a burger. And there was this guy watching the basketball. It was a Sunday afternoon, a guy watching a basketball game, and we were talking, and he says, "What are you here for?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm here for a missing children's conference, And he, "Oh, yeah, so am I, And so, where are you from?" And I said, "Montana." And we just, BS'd. I finished up and went back up to my room. Well, the next day the conference started, and in walks the same guy I was talking to at the bar. He's in a suit, and he gets up front and starts talking. And I'm like, "Well, shit, that guy's the deal, man," and he saw me, a guy from Tennessee. He'd been the chief of police in Knoxville for years, and he retired and started with the Department of Justice. And he sees me, and he goes, "Hey, Montana, how you doing?" And so we got to talking, and I told him Ryan's story, and he said, "Man," and he said, "You're in law enforcement." I said, "Yeah," and he said, "Wow. We need to talk more, So he and I corresponded, but I went back to work. I went back to DCI, doing the regular stuff I would always do. But something about that just called me. I'm like, maybe I could reach more people. Maybe I could tell Ryan's story. The day we buried Ryan, the day of his funeral, I put my hand on his casket and I said, I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something to make sure that your memory lives on. And I thought, well, that's law enforcement. Yeah, of course, I can make a difference there. But it's almost like he was telling me, yeah, you did good, but now it's time. And I literally got this feeling like feeling like you got to do something else.
Right.
And I knew when it was time, and I was scared as hell. I was like, I'm going to give up my law enforcement career and not know what to do, and but it was like I was guided through it, and it was a hard transition. I had a young family then, and I was like, what am I going to do if this doesn't work out? But it worked out for me.
Yeah.
So it was a tough, weird time, but it worked.
But I think too, though, the law enforcement gives you that. So you've got obviously your brother's story, but then you've got all this credibility.
Yeah.
Because you went out and tried to prevent it through all the justified proper channel, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, so that gives you a ton of credibility, which I think, is probably God's way of saying, okay, this is what I'm going to use to prepare you for this.
Right. It definitely was a stepping stone. Early on in my law enforcement career, if you would have come up to me and said, "Hey, Derek, I heard that your brother was abducted and murdered at 8 years old by a sex offender," I would have probably said, "Yeah, he was," not really gotten into it at all. But a series of things happened to me, going to that training course. At the time, we had the Dylan and Shasta Groney case over in Idaho. But Dylan and Shasta were brother and sister. They were abducted by, I'm trying to think of it. Can't think of his name right now, but this guy basically watched those kids, killed the rest of their family, took Dylan and Shasta. Dylan was murdered in Montana over by St. Regis. Shasta was recovered in a Denny's restaurant eating with the suspect, and she was saved. And in, that case, DCI was sort of peripherally involved in that. And hearing that, that case, I'm like, here's a sex offender. They know this guy's a sex offender. He's out, and he takes these kids, kills, the mom, the stepdad, the 13-year-old brother, and takes the 2 little kids. And a guy like that's out of prison.
Yeah.
And he had committed crimes in North Dakota, Minnesota, and he was out. And I thought, how could that happen? How in the hell can that happen after all this time? And so I just saw little signs, I guess, that pushed me towards, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
This is absolutely what you need to do. And so I always think back about that because I never want to forget where I came from, ever.
Yeah.
And I always think about that, that direction that I had from God, from my little brother saying this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's worked, and I trust it.
Absolutely.
I absolutely trust it.
It's funny. It's being in law enforcement as long as I have been. It's weird. The older and wiser you get, the more you realize that, the gun and the badge don't solve all the problems.
No.
And a lot of times what we really, really need is public education for people to be more aware of what's going on.
Right.
And then to do 2 things, to help law enforcement with
Right.
those investigations. And there's many positive ways they can help you. And also to hold law enforcement accountable when they're not doing what they should be doing.
Right.
And you don't get that unless people like you get out there and take that on and say, and it's a heavy lift because there's so many people, there's so many organizations.
Right.
But we have to have that. We have to.
Yeah, absolutely. When I lost my badge of gun, I didn't lose it. I turned it in. Yeah. But I always used to kid my bureau chief, John Strandell. He'd say, "Oh, we're going to the range next week," and I'd always say, "Oh, I got to get my gun out of the pawn shop, John." and I think when he was new, he came back into my office one day and said, "Is your gun really in the pawn shop?" I said, "No, dude, I'm just kidding you." But you kind of have that. I got a badge, but I'll tell you what, doing the work I do, it's so. It helps law enforcement so much that
absolutely
I still feel like I'm part of the fray, and doing what I'm doing. And when I get a call, Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation, they have a CART team, and they have 4 regions in Iowa. And a good friend of mine, Adam DeCamp, who is with DCI, he oversees all the CART teams with the regions. And he called me one Saturday night. I'm watching a movie on the couch, and 11 o'clock at night, and I'm like, if that's Adam DeCamp, he just doesn't call,
right.
willy-nilly. And I answered it, and they had a 12-year-old girl that was in foster care. She was a girl with autism. She walked away from her foster family, and they lived in a rural area. I think like a cornfield or whatever they have in Iowa there. But
Yeah.
she left, and Adam was just calling me to say, this is what we've done. You know, we've interviewed the parents. We've searched the house. You know, this is what we've done. He ran it by me. I'm like, yeah. I said, you guys are doing a good job, you know. And I said, have you got drones with FLIR? He says, they're on their way, you know. And I said, good. I said, you've got things going the way you should. You're following got the check boxes going. And he called me probably, and I finished my conversation with him probably about an hour and a half later. And he said, we found her. She was in a field. Our drones found her with FLIR. And
It's awesome.
And you know, for him to call me and give me that kind of trust, to call me and say, hey, you know, are we doing this right? Just, it's such a good feeling. And then on top of that, to know that, you know, maybe my brother had a hand in it, you know, because I think, you know, a lot of what I do, he guides, you know, and I really feel, it feels good, you know.
Yeah.
It just is a good feeling when something turns out right. And we've had them turn out bad. I mean, don't get me wrong. We've had some cases that didn't turn out well.
Absolutely. You know? Yeah. No, that's the reality, unfortunately. So you're a father.
Soon to be a grandfather.
So talk to me about what that was like, because having grown up and seen that,
Yeah.
how hyper vigilant were you when you had kids?
Well, being in law enforcement, you know, you're hyper vigilant anyway. I mean, you know, no matter what you've gone through, any guys that I know or gals that I know that are in law enforcement, they're like hyper vigilant about their kids.
Yep.
But with me, it was hypervigilance on steroids, you know. And one of the really unique things with me about raising my kids is every time one of them would turn 8 years old, it seemed like I held my breath for a whole year.
Yeah.
Because that's when my brother was killed. That's when he was taken. So in my mind would click, oh, they're going to be 8, and I would worry. I mean, I just became even more vigilant about where they were, what they were doing at 8 years old. So I know my kids went through that. They remember it, you know.
Wow.
They remember that time. And so it was something that, you know, working through it now, looking retrospectively at it, it was probably most of it justified, but it was extreme for me, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I feel like, especially my 2 oldest kids, I feel like I've kind of ruined them in a way, because, you know, I see my 18-year-old son, he has like anxiety.
right.
And so is my daughter. And I think it's because of my anxiety. And then my wife was a social worker. So
Sure.
she was working child abuse cases, and I was working, and I worked crimes against children most of my career. And yeah, I can really relate to that, but I can't imagine what it would have felt like for you. And the sad part is the reality of it is it's less than 1%.
Yeah.
So all we do is torture ourselves.
Right.
We just put
Absolutely.
ourselves through hell for it.
Yeah. You know, they always say, you know, lightning doesn't strike twice, but you can't tell me that in my mind.
No.
You know, you
absolutely
can't tell
not.
me that, because not only did it happen with my brother, but I've seen cases around the state or around the country where it's happened again.
Yeah.
You know, very same stuff, you know. And
Absolutely.
I think with kids, you know, they see more than they hear.
Yeah.
And it's with me, my anxiety, being in law enforcement, and even what I do now to my kids, I think was palpable. They saw it in me.
Yeah.
They could see it and the way it affected me. And so as a result, you kind of, you know, I kind of tended to push the kids away for their own safety, maybe,
Yeah.
you know, but it's weird. You know, this career is something that, you know, we're supposed to be tough, you know.
Yep.
Law enforcement's supposed to be tough, and we're not supposed to, you know, you can go from a child abuse to domestic violence to a fatal car wreck and then go home and just leave it at the door. It doesn't work that way.
No,
it doesn't work
doesn't.
that way. You know.
No.
And it trickles down.
Yep.
It's like historical trauma that we talk about.
Yeah.
It trickles down to your kids.
and the hard part about it is this is like, I mean, I'm sure you feel that you and I are the same in this, is that neither one of us would trade what we've done for anything in the world.
No.
Because you do save some kids.
Yeah.
You do make a difference, and saving one kid makes it worth it.
Right.
And so you do it, but then you have your own family, and I think they really, really feel that, you know, like you said, trickle down on them.
Right.
You know, and it happened to me too with my dad. I mean, I saw things he went through, and then it makes you. And then as you grow older, you're like, well, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and it's all those bravado things that we talk about.
Yeah.
We don't think about the other side of it.
Right.
That didn't even crosses your mind.
Yeah.
But you know, for you know, people watching this and stuff, I think one of the things I really want them to understand is like that hypervigilance and all that stuff. It's not just towards bad guys.
Yeah.
It's to our own wives and children and everything.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a, and I don't want to say this wrong, but it's a little bit of a prison you put yourself in.
Yeah.
And when you do reach a certain age when you start to chill out.
Yeah.
But it's not easy.
No, it's not. And you know, and it's something that consumed me. I mean,
Absolutely.
You know, things that I saw in my career, you know, in law enforcement, things that I've seen of late, you know, that, you know, I belong to a team called Team Adam with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. It's retired law enforcement that respond when children go missing. And, you know, some of those cases, just some of the things that you hear about, you know, can take me right back to my brother's situation, you know, and it had a big impact on me, you know, and what I started to do, and like you said, put yourself in a jail cell, you know, you start pushing people away.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you're in your own little place and you don't want to talk to anybody. Sometimes you don't want to get dressed in the morning. And I dealt with it. I think that I went from traveling a lot to COVID hit, and all of our training shut down. And I'm a people person. I got to be around people.
Right.
I got to be around folks, you know, and we went and we spun our training up online, you know, on Zoom, which was fine. But all of a sudden I found myself drinking every day, all day long, every single day, all day long. And then suddenly all these things from work and cases and mostly my little brother were starting to come back to me. And I was starting to just hit a wall with, and I'm like, why the hell is this shit coming back to me now?
Right.
You know, I've been fine all these years, and all of a sudden I can't go a day without drinking a bunch just to fight what's in my head. You know, and I didn't know what to do. I mean, I thought, is this going to be the rest of my life?
Right.
You know, and I couldn't stop it. And I was lucky I reached out for help. You know, I found a place for, I don't say PTSD anymore. It's PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury, you know, rather than disorder. You know, it's an injury.
Yeah.
It's an actual injury you get on duty, you know, or working. And I was lucky to find a center in California called Wings Recovery that specializes in first responders. And I found it through a friend, another sheriff, who had been through the program himself. And you know, he's a good friend of mine. And I said, hey, you know, I see you went to this place. He said, yeah, you need to go there. He said, I was in trouble.
Yeah.
And luckily, you know, they got me in. I went out there. I was very reluctant to go out there. I remember flying out there. I flew out of Great Falls here, and I told my mom. My mom gave me a ride to the airport, and I told her, my flight's not till like 4. Well, my flight, you know, or I told her my flight's at noon or something. It wasn't till 4, but I sat in the airport here and drank.
Yeah.
And then I had a layover in Salt Lake. And I sat in the airport and drank. And then I got to San Diego, and I told them, I said, my flight doesn't get in till like 5 or 6 at night. And they said, okay, we'll send somebody to get you. Just text us.
Right.
I sat in the airport and drank. So by the time they picked me up, I was a mess. And the one gal goes, "You've been drinking?" I said, "Yes." I said, "I can't make it through a day, you know." And, I got to that treatment facility, immediately thought that I had made a huge mistake because they took everything from me, my phone, my computer, everything from me, And it took me about 2 weeks to really get into the therapy, and I remember meeting with my therapist, and I said, "I'm only going to be here maybe 30 days. And she said, 30 years of trauma in 30 days. That sounds cool. How are we going to do that?" She says, I have a doctorate degree. I'm a trauma therapist, but she said, "I don't think I can work that miracle." And she did something with me called EMDR training or EMDR therapy, trauma therapy. And it stands for eye movement something. But I was like, this is bullshit. This is voodoo crap. And I don't want any part of it. Yeah. She's like, okay, we'll figure something out. But she said, let's just try. And she actually got me to do it without me knowing I was doing it.
Right.
And all the trauma that I had accumulated over the years, I was able to reframe that through this trauma therapy. It doesn't go away. It's never going to go away. It's always going to be there. But I was able to reframe it. And I'll give you an example. Where they found my brother, Ryan, I went back to Libya a year later because I was convinced that he was still there and we'd left him behind. Because I never did get to see Ryan in the casket or anything like that. I had convinced myself a year after he died, still as a teenager, 18 years old, I convinced myself that it was all made up. He didn't really die. He's still in Libya. I got to go back there and I got to go look for him. So at 18 years old, I drove back over to Libya, got with the sheriff there, and I said, "I need to know where you found him." And the sheriff showed me, took me out where they found his body. And ever since then, I've, on a crime scene or even out camping, you see an area that's similar and you can go back like that. And you start that panicking and that, so during trauma, we talked about trauma therapy. We talked about that, and I was able to reframe that. My therapist, Megan, she's such a great gal, but she said, "What did Ryan like?" And I said, "He always talked about building a cabin, in the wilderness and living off the grid and stuff. Even at 8 years old."
Even at 8,
that.
huh?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And so we built a cabin there, and. So now when it comes to me, I can say, okay, there's that thought, you're having a little bit of trouble. Think about the cabin,
right.
And I built that. And it reframed it. And all of a sudden I'm there, I'm at this place, 67 days, and I didn't want to leave.
Right.
I had worked through so much that I just discounted, that I'd stuffed down, that I didn't talk about, that I didn't think would ever resurface. And I dealt with it. And it was scary. It was hard work, but I did it, and it just, and ongoing stuff, I still see a therapist. I gave up drinking altogether. And I just had a guy that we're in Fort Lauderdale and he's, brand new on our team, and I get down to the bar where he's at, and I don't have a problem with people drinking or being around it. I don't crave it or anything like that. But he's sitting there, and I said, "Hey, Don." He says, "Hey, taste this beer. It's an amber beer that's made locally and stuff like that." And I said, "Nah." He said, "No, just take a sip." He said, "You'll like it." I said, "Yeah, you're goddamn right. I'll like it." I said, "Because if I have a sip of that," I said, "I'm not making my plane in the morning. I'm going to just sit at this bar until everything's gone. Every drop of it's gone." And I said, "I probably won't have a job, and neither will you, because I'll blame you somehow, because that's the way my shit works." Yeah. And so he's like, "Oh, you don't drink?" And I said, "No." I had a little problem with it. And so, my life is so much better now since I quit all that shit. I'm more present than I used to be. Mm-hmm. I mean, my oldest son, he's a physical therapist in Helena there. He and his wife are going to have a baby on December 17th.
That's awesome.
And, you know, to be present for that and to be,
Yeah.
other than just physically, like
Yeah.
being there for them and enjoying it with them, it's just a fucking new world, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible. I don't know if I can say that word on your
You're
show.
good.
Oh, good.
You're good. We have no censoring here.
Yeah, right.
So that's crazy. And you know what's funny about that? And one of the things that kind of frustrates me is we do a really good job in law enforcement for the most part. When people hit the crisis, we are good at like, okay, we've got a treatment place for you.
Yeah.
We know how to take care of you. We've made sure ahead of time your insurance covers you. We send people out. And a lot of times they come back with really good tools and all that stuff. But one of the things that I don't think that we factor appropriately is that a lot of people, and I'm going to use you as a total example to this, they come into our profession with some form of childhood trauma,
Right.
savior complex, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That brings them there because there's a calling, right? There was a moment in their life when they're like, I'm gonna change the world through my lens by making a difference.
Yeah.
And I don't think we do a really good job of factoring those other factors.
Mm-hmm.
And then we and them, the deputy, the officer, whatever, we all blame it on just the work.
Right.
And then sometimes all we do is work on the work symptoms.
Yeah.
And we don't work on the, childhood symptoms or the at-home symptoms. We don't focus on that because all those things you said. We're not supposed to be weak. We're not supposed to have chinks in our armor.
Yeah, and when I went out to that trauma treatment therapy, I thought, good, they're going to focus it. And when Megan told me, we got to focus on what happened to your brother. And I knew that was a problem. I knew that some horrific dreams that I'd have and stuff. I knew that was part of the problem, but I'm like, I don't think I want to go down that road.
Yeah.
But with her help, I was able to do it. And you're right. I mean, it was about much more than who I was on my job.
Yeah.
It was about the totality of everything to include my job. That, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure you've done this. In fact, I know you've done this. I sometimes will get trauma and I don't, my 3 children are alive and well, but I will cross over the trauma I see at work and I'll impose it in my mind like it happened to my own children.
Yep.
And it is a horrible thing to do, but your brain will go there.
Yep.
And if you let it, it's really hard to unsee.
Yeah.
It's really hard to undo.
Yeah.
And
it's associating with, it's taking a past trauma and associating it with your present situation. And it's happened to me a ton of times. It's like suddenly I feel like, I'll give an example. My daughter Addison, she was a teenager and she locked her door, of her bedroom. And it was in the morning. I went to wake her up and she wouldn't come to the door. She's just sleeping hard, and I panicked because I'm like, somebody took her. Because I had just been involved in a case where somebody did come through a window and take a kid, So I was putting all that on my situation and making that a reality in my mind. And it's just association with that past trauma that causes you to do that. And luckily now I have, the tools to work with now to get me out of that, to say, okay, you need to back off, work, do your steps or whatever and get grounded before, you fly off the handle. And it's not a thing that, I didn't get out of that facility and go, I'm cured now, I'm better. It's just not that. It's an ongoing thing,
Every day you gotta work on it.
And I go even when I feel good.
Yeah.
I go even when I feel good because I don't want to wait till that lowest point again to have to go there. So I go if I'm feeling good, and I can talk myself out of, oh, I'm feeling great. Why would I do that? But I go even when I'm feeling good.
Absolutely.
So
yeah. No, you absolutely have to, in my opinion. And I do the same thing. And it's, we have to look at things different, because there's a lot of things. And then especially if you decide you want to go into crimes against children, or you want to do what you're doing, which is giving the education to all the people who do it, you better find ways to take care of yourself while you're doing it.
Absolutely. There's got to be a pathway for you to get help, or to constantly seek that peer support.
Yep.
I think peer support is probably one of the best things that we have in law enforcement.
It can be,
Yeah.
if the peers are being appropriate.
Right.
One of the things I've always struggled with was I call it the Miami Vice effect. That's my little name for it. And one of the things is, and I'm sure it was the same for you when you started in law enforcement, everyone wants to be a drug cop.
God.
Right?
Thank God I never did that.
Right. Everybody wants to, right? Because Miami Vice.
Yeah.
You're going to drive in a Ferrari, and you're going to wear the pastels, and, it's going to be super cool, wear your shoulder holster, do all those fun things. And there is still, even today, modern day, there's still the sexiness of drug crime.
Right.
But here's what it really is. It's a very black and white law enforcement.
Right.
Okay. Like this former prosecutor used to tell me, you don't walk up to people and find child abuse in their pocket.
Yeah. Right. A little work to be done.
But you do walk up to people and it's like, oh, drugs are on you. They're in your possession. You go to jail. Although with child pornography, that's now changed.
Yeah.
You do find people now that do have child abuse material in their pocket. But the reality of what I'm trying to get at, though, is this, is the kind of drug cop mentality. And I'm not there's some great drug, and trust me, with fentanyl right now, we need them. We need them everywhere. But it's also a space in which I think a lot of cops can exist or strive to get to, because the emotional toll and torture on their body is, a doper is a doper is a doper.
Yeah.
They see things, because obviously they go into houses and people abuse their kids or kill their kids because of drugs. So that happened. And when those things happen to drug cops, they're hurt bad. You can see it.
Yeah.
Because they've protected themselves from that for so long. They don't have a coping mechanism yet for it.
Right.
But that's a real effect. And those who are going to go down that road and go protect kids, I think they need to start seeking therapy, seeking help before they ever go into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of like we did with internet crimes against children. ICAC is a federally funded program. Task forces I think there's 69 of them in the country right now.
Something like that, yeah.
And the big thing for them is, if you were going to go into that, you had to have a safety net built in before you even started the job.
Yep.
And so we've got agencies that now provide that. And, those that get into that job of, child protection are able to go, okay, I've got this built in. They let them know what they're getting into, but they have to have that safety net built in. And why we're not doing it for all law enforcement,
No, I totally agree. When I started ICAC in, 2012 now.
Yeah.
When I started, my first conference I went to, they introduced me to the child abuse material.
Yeah.
With another detective. And it was like, from what I ended up seeing later on, it was very PG to what I later saw, which was the most horrible thing ever. But they coached me through certain things. They said, listen, if you're going to do this, don't turn on the sound. Sometimes you have to review cases. Never always have the mute button on your computer.
Yeah.
Never do it. Once you did it, I had one, and he started getting teary-eyed when he told me this. He said, I did it once, and every time, he goes, now I can put the sound to everything. My brain does it. And if I wouldn't have done it, I couldn't have done that.
Right.
So they teach you things like that. And then they teach you on how to, go through your cases. And then you had to be set up. We had therapy. I want to say it was every month or something. I don't remember what it was. It was frequent, and you were set up from the go. And it was like your boss would walk in and go, "Your appointment's now," and you'd go.
Yeah.
And then and the other thing too was what I liked. I was really blessed with the Great Falls Police Department. I was super blessed. When I would close my door, they knew I was reviewing case material.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and I'd put up a little caution thing because I never wanted anybody to walk in.
Yeah.
And I always had my computer situated where you couldn't, but I just didn't want to. I didn't want to victimize somebody.
Right.
Unnecessarily.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I had really good bosses because I'd be in there, and I'd come out, and they just look at me and they'd say, "Go."
Yeah.
And they never made me get off the clock. I just got in my car, and I sometimes went to the gym, or I sometimes went for a drive.
Yeah.
And I just cleared my head before I went home.
Yeah, absolutely.
I let that stuff get out of my brain. I, turned on the music really loud so I could listen to good tunes. I could take my mind somewhere else. And sometimes it would take me a while to do it.
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes it would take my brain a minute to do it.
Yeah. And sometimes, you can't. And,
Yeah, no, you can't.
and there's just things that, I still think about a few things that I've seen that just don't leave you, and no matter what you do, they're there. And then, the process of reframing it, trying to find some way else to look at it or think about it really helps me get, kind of at least put it back a little ways,
I like that. I like that reframing.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to look at it. I want to dive into what you do
Okay.
now, but before we do, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Go.
Your health journey is as unique as you are. The Peak Great Falls has everything you need for your fitness journey. They are your partner in wellness with a top-notch facility, an expert staff, and a very welcoming vibe. Locally owned, community driven. Join them today. Everybody needs a good insurance plan. Whether it's for home or auto insurance, check out Heinbaugh Agency. Eric Heinbaugh is a local agent focused only on customer service, not sales. The Double Barrel Cafe is all about you, the amazing people of Cascade County. With every purchase you make, they give back to our community. Every bite and sip fuels their mission. Let's make a positive change, one cup and one bite at a time, because the Double Barrel is not just a cafe, they're building a better community. If you haven't noticed lately, Cascade County is booming, and the choice for all your construction needs is Builders First Source. They even have an automated home builders solution for all of your construction needs. Go to 826 Northwest Bypass in Great Falls and check them out today. Are you looking to replace those floors in your home? Or maybe you're doing new construction? The place I trust is Contract Flooring Carpet One. This is a locally owned and operated business here in Great Falls, and they are committed to serving you and giving you the very best prices and the very best product and service. Go see Contract Flooring Carpet One today. If you love a farm-to-table experience as much as I do, then you have to go to the Roadhouse Diner. The local McCafferty Ranch beef served on every burger. Try my personal favorite, Death by Bacon, today. When deciding who I would trust for the technology component of this podcast, the choice was simple: Information Systems of Montana. Whether purchasing products for business or when I had them build me a new MacBook to catch child predators, they delivered, creating a solution for my exact needs. Contact Information Systems of Montana today. If you're passionate about firearms and the Second Amendment like I am, one of the best places in all of Montana to go is Mitchell Supply. Jim and Tammy Mitchell have been running this gun store for decades. They're major supporters of the Second Amendment, and they're major supporters of our community. And obviously, they're supporters of this podcast. For all your firearms needs, go check out Mitchell Supply today. And we're back, and so tell me about what you're doing now. Who you're working for and what you got going on now.
So I started, after DCI, I started a nonprofit, Ryan United. And basically what Ryan United was dedicated to was training law enforcement, helping crime victims. We got our 501c3 and really delved into that. And we still do some things with Ryan United, mainly helping people that have been affected by, child sexual abuse, survivors, families. who don't know where to turn. They're introduced to the justice system and don't know where to go. And so we help them through that. But in addition to that, I am currently working with the National Criminal Justice Training Center, which is funded by the U.S. Department of Justice. And really what they are is, a one-stop shop for law enforcement training. Anything from child sexual abuse, interviewing sexual predators, missing children, runaways, all that law enforcement training that's needed out there, and it's cutting edge. They have people from around the country that are subject matter experts. So the area that I oversee under the National Criminal Justice Training Center is just the child abduction response teams. So my job is to go around the country and develop teams and also enhance the ones that are there already. So through training, technical assistance, hopefully someday down the road, money from the federal government to enhance those teams. But really, I go around and make sure these teams are able to function, that they have the capacity to work and again, those teams have those resources at the ready if a child goes missing. So the name Child Abduction Response Team, it doesn't have to be a child abduction for them to go out on something. They use it, across the country, they use it for any missing child.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we're doing that. We've got associates that work for us that are kind of like contracted people that are subject matter experts that come in and they'll teach, they'll come in and talk about their cases or, their expertise. And so get them trained up and then eventually get them certified through the Department of Justice. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's super awesome.
Yeah, it's, for me, it's like, okay, what's the one thing I could do that would make a difference, and given my backstory and experience, it's like, I don't think there's anything that I could do that's better than my job. I get to meet so many people out there in law enforcement and in communities, because a child abduction response team is a multidisciplinary team.
Yes.
So it's anybody that would respond if a child went missing. So we have child protective services on some teams. We have probation parole on some teams, fish and game,
Absolutely.
highway patrol. So you get all this multidisciplinary team together to respond. And the amount of people that I meet that are just like gung-ho, we got to do this. Well, you and Derek VanLuchene, when I talked to you guys about CARD initially, you're like, let's do this, and just that kind of enthusiasm behind it is really, those are the kind of people I get to travel around the country and meet, and occasionally go to cool places. You know, Fort Lauderdale wasn't bad, although it rained like 8 inches in one day when I was there.
Fort Lauderdale is beautiful.
Well, Honolulu the week after next. Yeah.
Oh, well, good for you. Oh, jeez. Yes. Wow.
They need training too,
They do. Yeah. They do. We have a detective at the sheriff's office, and he is just doing an amazing job, Detective Cambick, and his passion is missing and murdered Indigenous people. Yeah. And he has rolled out this whole program. And one of the things I love about his program is he took investigative techniques from missing people, and then he melded it together with search and rescue. Absolutely. And we have a program, you probably know about it, CalTopo. You ever heard of that? Yeah. So we use CalTopo, and it's an accountability software. Right. Because not only is it creating maps for you for your search grid, but it's also telling you where everybody's been and where everybody's searched. Yeah. So you're not searching the same ridge line 3,000 times and missed the one next to it. Right. But then you can overlay it with a secondary search, and you can do all this really cool stuff. It's
great technology.
But then he's also using that lost person science and all that stuff, which people, I want to explain this so people understand. It doesn't translate to abductions, right? Because there's another person who has a say in this whole thing, which is the abductor. Right. However, it does make it so you can rule out that lost person behavior. Right. You can go, okay, we've searched all of this. This isn't a lost person, and the immediate area is typically where people are found, and sometimes even in an abduction. Yeah, absolutely. And so it's one of those things, and he just does a phenomenal job. And it is funny about this is I signed him lead to a Amber Alert case we had
Yeah.
right when I was first sheriff. And I don't know, I have no idea if he had the bug before that, but after that, he was like, once you've been through one of those cases, and regardless of the outcome, if you did well or if you weren't successful, either way, you're like, I need to know more about this, because I don't care how good you are or how good you think you are at missing persons cases. They're hard.
Right.
And there's so many variables.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So many variables.
And not only that, when you add in cultural considerations, with like I know with Indian country, the cultural considerations, the ability to be able to investigate it, so you keep that in mind. Because if you go in there and you don't respect that, or you don't respect that culture, and you don't know what to do, you're never going to get anywhere. Nope. And that's really something that we have a whole section dedicated to child abduction, missing children in Indian country, and then the MMIP as well. But they're really good at talking to law enforcement about, hey, if you have something on the reservation, this is what you need to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to go in and do this, there's certain things that you have to consider culturally and otherwise when you're in those communities. So in the whole issue of MMIP, it's just something that we've never really looked at, or stats haven't been kept on that, and it's staggering what we find out, You know
what it reminds me of? Do you remember when we were young in law enforcement and they started to take sexual abuse, incestual sexual abuse? Mm-hmm. Remember when it used to be something that happens between that family?
Yeah.
And it rarely got reported. Mm-hmm. And if it did, it sometimes was like, well, they're going to go live with their aunt and uncle now, and that's how we're going to solve this problem.
Right.
And that was the end of it, kind of.
Yeah.
Well, now that's a 100-year sentence.
Yeah.
And as it should be.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me, like what you said with the missing and murdered Indigenous persons. It's almost like culturally, and maybe it's a failure of law enforcement, I don't know, there was some bit of acceptance that that's what happens.
Yeah, it could very well be.
And then now we're starting to kind of make awareness and saying, no, it's not acceptable for this to happen to anybody, regardless of your culture or where you come from. It's not okay for people to go missing. It's not okay.
Yeah, it's not okay. And and especially and we encourage law enforcement to listen to the families, because the families know that, and I call it victimology. Yes. That the family knows that person's usual behavior, and if it's out of the ordinary. We have one mother that her son is still missing, Kyron Horman, out of Oregon, and he went missing from school. And law enforcement tried to say, well, this and well, that. Well, she said, I know my son. He wouldn't just wander away from school. That's not the way he is, And, and that goes back to the MMIP cases, going back to the family and really listening to what happened, what they know is the usual pattern for that person and what that person's usual moves are and things like that, I think can help. But I think you're right. I think to a certain degree it was like, well, that's what happens, and it's kind of like domestic violence. When we first got involved in law enforcement, I remember, Conrad PD showing up to a house. I had an old timer with me, been in law enforcement 100 years, and we kind of just made sure people weren't bloody and kind of just patched it up and said, now be good the rest of the night, It's just not something, and
it's the number one cause of homicide.
Yeah. And thinking back on that, you go, oh my God, and how far we've come just in that.
Oh yeah.
So I really think what I'm glad to see is the resources coming to our tribal communities on that issue. Absolutely. And I think the federal government is paying attention on that and is hearing that. I think that, there's never going to be enough resources, but I do see some going into that.
We have to do a better job in law enforcement of collaborating.
Yeah.
Okay, because when you were the victim of that horrible crime against your brother, you didn't care what color their uniform was, whether they came to you with a suit and tie or a pair of jeans.
Yeah.
You didn't care.
Yeah.
You just wanted them to go out and save your brother's life and find the guy that did it.
Right.
That's all you care about. And we are so siloed, and it's getting better, but it takes a lot of really good leadership to we're going to argue and fight in law enforcement.
Right.
That's going to happen. But then we all got to say, okay, we got after each other a little bit because we didn't like this or like that. Okay, circle the wagons.
Yeah.
Let's come back together and say, hey, we still got a mission to do, and let's put our best resources towards it, because people don't care what uniform you wear.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Not only that, but we have one mother, Molly Bish, 16 years old, went missing in Massachusetts. She was a lifeguard at a little swimming hole that they had. She reported to work one day and then went missing. And Molly was found. That was 1997. And I think in 2000, her remains were found. Still an unsolved homicide. But Molly's mother, Maggie, speaks to law enforcement. And one of the things that she says that really captured my attention, it really is something that I try and reiterate, that these families expect that you know how to respond to a missing children. They're calling law enforcement because they expect you to know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And you kind of see the oh shit factor, because quite honestly, like you're saying, we may not be trained. We may not know how to do that. So it's like you've got to train, back to the training. You got to train at that highest level. So the family knows that you know.
Well, it's kind of risk management 101. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a high risk, low frequency event.
Yeah.
So anything in law enforcement that doesn't happen that often, but the consequences are great.
Yeah.
You put all of your training towards that event.
Right.
You always do that. We do it, and now we're finally, like I said, probably in the last decade, starting to catch up with missing persons, and that's starting to be the priority. We're like, okay, no. When this is going to be the Super Bowl of what we do, we have to be
ready.
We have to prepare and train for that.
I had a chief of police stand up at I was speaking at a national conference. I think it was our Amber Alert Symposium. And I was doing a breakout session on child abduction response teams. And I had a hand go up, and I'm like, I'm kind of folksy when it comes to that stuff. I don't get up there and lecture, but I said, yeah. And he's like, I'm chief of police from so-and-so. And he says, I don't know why I would spend the time getting a team together. We've never had a abducted child, or really, we've had children that go missing, but we find them within, this amount of time. And he says, I don't think it'd be worth it. And I shit you not, 3 weeks after that conference,
it happened.
I got a call, and he said, we just had a child abduction. And he said, I wish that I would have taken that more seriously, and that's your worst nightmare, is that you're the administrator, and you know this better than anybody. You're the administrator, and you're standing up in front of TV cameras, and they're asking you, what did you do, Sheriff?
Yeah.
What resources did you put into this?
So that aggravates me so bad. That's like saying we're not going to have our people carry guns because we've never had an officer involved shooting.
Right.
It's never happened here.
Yeah.
So we're, all this time and money spent on the range and buying guns, and plus it's a liability because they could shoot the wrong person or shoot themselves. So we're just going to get rid of them.
Yeah.
And then hope for the best.
Yeah.
And you can steal this if you want. But one of the number one phrases I say in our organization is anticipatory leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where to be a good leader, you have to anticipate problems that are coming, train for them, prepare for them, and be ready.
Yeah.
That's anticipatory leadership. And if you don't have that, you don't belong in the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Period.
Yeah, I mean,
Don't belong.
Your example with the gun is just exactly right. Getting rid of or defunding the police. You know, it's like, why would you do something like that to take away something that's, there's bad cops in every department probably, and I've seen that, but to take away something like that, you're going to need that you're going to rely on.
And you're right. The bad cop thing is this: there's a solution for that. You fire them, and if necessary, you prosecute them.
Right.
You hold them to the same standards as society's held to, and society is very forgiving to that.
Yeah.
In fact, they're like, okay, cool. Thank you for taking care of your own.
Yeah.
And
we saw the impact with our training, law enforcement that, I get out there to agencies and I talk about starting a child abduction response team. And the number one answer I get is, why can't you have one? If I ask the question, why can't you have a child abduction response team? The number one response that I get is manpower. We don't have enough people just to answer calls. How can we form this team? And so our idea and our answer to that is to get a regional approach going, like you guys were doing here with, city, county, and outlawing agencies that have something to offer, getting a regional approach and putting that together so you have the manpower. But, we're seeing in law enforcement, especially with our training, it's just a lack of, they're very responsive. They're responding to.
But it's also about prioritizing.
Right.
As a sheriff, I prioritize everything.
Yeah.
And if a child abduction comes in, guess what? Everything else is not priority right now.
Yeah.
No, don't get me wrong. We get a shooting. Yes, we're gonna have to send people.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to divide and conquer a little. But your garden variety vandalisms, your business checks, your traffic stops, all that stuff stops.
Yeah.
Unless it's germane or related to this case.
Yeah.
And you just give a directive.
Yeah.
And you just say, this is our only priority right now.
This is our priority one, yeah.
Get it done.
Yeah.
And we're smart. I mean, we're not a good leader still anticipates another problem. So you leave some resources to handle other things. But you're right. We've called in other sheriffs before.
Yeah,
hey,
absolutely. Yeah.
Sheriff, I need 10 of your guys and I need them now. And up they come.
Yeah. And that's the great thing about Montana is that, you can do that. I mean, I've been on, I responded to a little girl missing over in Wolf Point. It was a witness child abduction. And I think some of your guys came. I mean, we had a great amount of people that came over the eastern part of the state that responded to that. And, for something that we thought was so bad, and in the suspect's words, she wasn't alive. And we found her alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so using that as an example of, this is an area with very few resources.
Yeah.
And they did it. They found her.
Oh yeah. If Sheriff Frederick in Wolf Point calls me tomorrow and says, I got a missing kid, I'm gonna up ass half my team and say, you're on the road. This is a done deal.
With that case, he just put out the word and we were getting people from all over the place, and
the whole CART team thing it's just an excuse. And the reason it is we struggled with SWAT teams.
Yeah.
And we just combined our SWAT team here because the city was struggling and so were we to find all the resources. And now it's amazing and we're not struggling anymore.
Yeah.
And things are running super smooth. And the law enforcement has got to start bringing their resources together.
Absolutely.
And do it and the other thing is, don't do it just on a CART team. Do it in your drug task force. Do it in your SWAT team. Do it in your detective division. Do it on all these little things so they practice working together. Yeah. They know how all this stuff works, their radio comms, all these things. So that when it happens, it's like, well, we've had 6 dry runs at this through other cases. We'll be fine.
Yeah. And that's what I like, in several of the teams that I deal with, they've realized that some teams will start out, it's just our department. We're having a CART team for just our department. I'm like, okay, that's your prerogative. We just come in and train and give you the tools. You do with it what you want. But I can tell you that when the rubber meets the road, and we've found a lot of teams that have had that experience that, they've had a missing child and they're like, well, this is just our case, and then now they're regional teams. I look at Ohio and they're like Delaware County, Ohio, they just made a huge regional team. It's because they know they can't handle it on their own.
For those out there listening, if you're wondering why regional and cooperation is good, bad guys, particularly people who abduct children, pretty much the most horrible scum of the earth, they don't drive to the county line and stop and say, I started this
Right.
in Cascade County. I better not go into Lewis and Clark. I'm going to turn around and stay here.
Right.
Because I don't want to screw up their investigation.
Yeah. Well, and you look at Joseph Duncan, and I was trying to think of his name earlier, that took the Groney kids, and committed horrible crimes. If you look at his past, he's all over the United States committing crimes against children. So you're right. And for us to come together on that and those horrific type crimes, it's going to take, everybody, and it's going to be all hands on deck with that.
Well, and here's the part that really frustrates me is we've learned that from ICAC.
Yeah.
Okay. When I worked ICAC, I started a case here because the victim was here. And that's how we determine the jurisdiction of the case. Okay, where's the victim? Which I love. I love that victim-centric ideology of the person who we're going to serve is in our community.
Right.
But next thing I know, I'm on a plane and I'm in San Bernardino, California, and I'm spending 10 days chasing a bad guy all over, up into Big Bear, down into LA, pinging his phone, because I need to catch him at the right time so he's got all of his child abuse material. And if he has any other victims, I catch them, all at the same, rescue them all at the same time. And, you're like, and that's the way it's supposed to work.
Right. Yeah.
And it was great. And we extradited him up here for trial. And as soon as he saw the shiny lights of the courtroom, he took a deal and off he went, But law enforcement has had all these examples where it works. Dope cops go all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'll chase drugs, clear to Mexico to arrest the cartel guys, but we're not going to do it in child protection.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate that work that you're doing. I really do, because it has to happen. And I hope you can continue to bang that drum as loud as you possibly can, because it needs to be heard.
I always think, sometimes I just think, wow, this kid from Montana, the things I've been able to see, the people I've been able to meet, I'm just really, really fortunate, just very grateful for, where I've been placed in life, and it's just it's one of the things that I think honors my brother the most.
Yeah.
And to be able to, just to be able to say, hey, bro, I got you,
Well, also honors God too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You took a situation which you could have given up on everything, and you decided to make something of it.
Yeah.
And that's huge. Before we wrap up, tell me this. What is the number one thing that we in law enforcement, because I'm going to ask you another part here.
Yeah.
So, is we in law enforcement could or shouldn't be doing to protect kids? Like, what is the thing out there that you're seeing that you're like, I wish just law enforcement all had this? What do you think it is?
Yeah, I think I wish law enforcement all had the ability to attend a multitude of trainings, like almost like a child protection academy. I hate to call it that, but like a all-inclusive, this is what you're going to deal with out there. And it could deal from, child abuse, child maltreatment. It's like a child protection academy. And you go there and you learn about all this stuff. So they're equipped just like the tools on their belt. They come out of there knowing, okay, this is what I need. And I think that, and I've always thought about this, but I think that would be even more important than what we do at the basic law enforcement academy even, because that's actual stuff you are going to deal with.
I agree.
In child protection. So I've always called it the Child Protection Academy, but it's kind of like an all-inclusive.
How long do you think it would be?
100 years. No, I don't know. I've got it, a concept on paper, but, a week-long Child Protection Academy where you go and you learn every aspect of that.
So I've thought about this too. I think it should be this. I think it should be whether you have a quarter or a whole year, doesn't matter. But I think it should be 4 weeks long.
Yeah.
And I think it should be broken up in chunks. So let's say in January you go, and let's say in March, and then let's say in like September, and then again in, December, whatever.
Yeah.
And the reason you do that is because adult learning can only absorb so much information.
Sure.
And then they go and they hone those skills during that quarter.
Yeah.
And then you make them come back, and they got to come back with redacted stuff, but they're going to come back with case studies that they worked on during their time.
Yeah.
And how did you use your skill? And they get evaluated. They get talked to, and they go, well, what could you have done different? And and you do it. You don't just do it with cops. You do it with social workers.
Absolutely.
You do it with prosecutors. You do it with all those people who are involved, because you need to get those prosecutors to understand how important the cases are.
Absolutely.
And you need to get them to stop taking deals, or if they're doing deals, they're doing it like the deal you had with Ryan. That was
right.
Like, okay, it's a good deal, and this will hopefully prevent further issues. But you do that, and they take it in lumps, and then at the end of that year, they're certified. But more important than that, they built a skill over that period of time. And we do it with leadership training.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got the executive leadership training at the academy that's 4 weeks long.
Yeah.
It takes 4 months to get through. And again, I always say you can judge a person by their priorities.
Right.
And it's funny. I mean, don't get me wrong, leadership is important.
Oh yeah.
It's important. But protecting children is more important.
Right.
But you actually need both. You have to have good leaders to have courage to do it, but you have to have both. But we have to start making this our priority.
Right. And back to your point too about the officer that's thinking about getting into that kind of work.
Yeah.
Thinking about, okay, maybe I want to protect children in law enforcement. That's going to be my bailiwick, send them to that.
Well, I think I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I think what you do is maybe even have an advanced academy. It's another week. So there's a 5th week added onto it.
Yeah.
But I think the 4 weeks, everybody's got to go through, because you know how it is when you work the street. You don't get to pick what call you go to.
Yeah. Right.
Your boss or the dispatcher sends you, and there you are.
Yeah.
So you might but they do it if it was leadership or guns.
Yeah.
They would. They'd say,
Yeah.
oh, it's not important. We got to do it. But when we talk about kids, it's like, we'll let those people do that and not those people. And it's a terrible.
And it is going to impact everybody. I mean, they back to these officers that are voluntold to be there. One guy said, I kind of got put on injury leave, and so they sent me here.
Yeah.
It's like, so you drew the short straw to protect kids? I don't get that.
That's no good.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you this right now. You have my full commitment. If you want to help build that for our community, for our state, I'm all in.
Yeah. I want to speak to the Sheriff's Association, get them on board, and get that partnership going with them. And
I don't think it's going to be a problem. And I happen to be the chairman of the Post Council right now. So
see, there you go.
We will. I know how to get this.
Can
thing
you reinstate me here?
But no, seriously, I mean it.
Yeah.
Like, we should really do that.
Yeah.
That is.
And if you need me to come make a presentation or whatever,
absolutely.
I can do that.
We should talk offline though and figure out get it all lined out so that our ducks are squared away. But I think it'd be great. So
absolutely.
Next question: what's the number one thing the community can do?
I think the number one thing that community members can do is communicate with not only their kids, but with each other on what's out there. Too many times with social media and stuff like that, people will put something out there as a concern, and they'll get lambasted. People are cruel on social media, but seriously, if just when my brother was abducted, it was kind of the boogeyman behind the bush. It was a guy that stalked and took him. Mm-hmm. We see different kinds of victimization of children. Usually it's somebody they know.
Absolutely.
It's somebody very close to them. So if other people can just watch out and don't be afraid to report the weird shit. If you don't feel right about it, it's probably not right.
That is great advice.
Yeah.
That is great advice.
And being able to communicate that in a form where you're not going to get trolled or whatever, just listen to each other and fucking be nice to people, we've lost that. But I think communication with our kids too, know what your kids are doing.
This is a true story on my phone. Okay. Since I've been sheriff, this is true. This has truly happened to me. I saw this was really weird. This guy stalking this little girl on Facebook Messenger. And the next day I get it at like 6 o'clock in the morning because you and I were having DMs the day before and I had to follow up with you. And all of a sudden I see it and I go, did you call 911?
Yeah.
And people are afraid to call 911.
Right.
And I'm like, that's a 911 call all day long.
Yeah,
some creepy guy following a kid or something. Do it.
Yeah. I always tell people, if it doesn't feel right in your gut, it's probably not right.
Yeah.
And do something about it. Get somebody else's perspective.
Absolutely.
And call the sheriff's department, call the city police. That's what they're around for.
And that's what we live for.
Yeah.
I mean, we're waiting for that call where somebody's like, this guy looks like he's sneaking up on a kid, and if you hurry up and get there in time, you could stop it. And we're like, this is why they gave me lights and sirens, badges and guns. Right. Here I come.
Yeah, and I think communication with your kids is big.
Absolutely.
And it's changed the way we do it. My son is 19. He's at Montana Tech and freshman there. And
it's awesome.
I remember asking my dad for money, like $10.
Yeah.
And it was like going to court. I had to prove my case why I needed $10. And by the end of the day, I wasn't sure if it was worth the $10 to go through all that. And now on the way here, I'm driving here and I get this notice. Liam has requested $100 from you. It's a request on Venmo. Yeah. It's like, Jesus, what about making the case like I had to do when I was a kid? What about that?
So true.
But it just, we've gotten to a different level, but it's not hard to communicate. It's not hard to communicate with your kids. And I think you gotta communicate with them.
Absolutely.
In some fashion. I think that's so important.
I need to have you back on.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to have you back on in the future. There's so many things I want to go over. Team Adam.
Yeah.
We've touched on like 4 or 5 things that I want to go over. I honestly believe this is going to be such a good podcast that everything that we talked about is going to be hard for everyone to absorb.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah. We can break it out. Yeah.
I think we need to do it again. But I want to say this to you. God bless you, man.
Hey, thanks.
You are a child protection warrior. Breaks my heart the way you had to get here. But thank you.
Yeah.
For being a man about it and saying you're going to make a difference.
Yeah, I just appreciate you having me on, and it helps me every time I tell the story. It's very it tells me I'm on the right path.
You definitely are.
Yeah,
and hold us accountable.
Yeah,
we need it.
Yeah,
God bless you, man.
God bless you, man.
Take care.
Thanks.
Hey everybody, Jesse Slaughter with the Pursuit Podcast. And we really appreciate the amazing support already that this channel has received. Our social media is blowing up. Everywhere we look, people are liking and clicking and commenting. But what we really need you to do is subscribe to our Facebook page and follow us on Spotify. That's what drives this channel. That's what's going to keep this channel going forever. Tim and Ben are behind the scenes doing tireless editing, working on this to make this come out the way it does, this high quality product that it is. So please go in there, click subscribe, click follow, and make sure that this channel sticks around for a long time, because we truly believe it's doing a lot of great things for our community. But there's many, many other people out there who we need to support. So follow and subscribe today. Thank you.